violent Salafi jihadis and to becoming the global field of religious terrorism. Why I said religious-based terrorism? It's not religious means that the terrorism that is based on religious-based arguments according their own interpretations. Put it that words, right? So, so because we have to be clear about the definition because definition matters. So my thesis is we need to update it. The strategy is never end point. The strategy is always the beginning, the starting point. That's why we have to be more creative, innovative, and updating our national security strategy and being integrated with Indonesian grand strategy. So, and we have a counter-terrorism law issued in 2003. We're still using it until today, to 2003. They're treating violent Islamist extremists as the criminal because they're performed by the citizens. That's why the police, national police, is placed as the frontliner, backed up by national intelligence and national military. That's the issue I'm going to raise, Dr. Blau. So what is the key policy focus for the future? Here's my recommendations, actually. Now, Indonesia, this current year, for the last 2 years, they're quite busy to, there's a plan to pass the new counterterrorism bill to supersede the old one, the 2003. But there is a tension between the Indonesian military and then police about how to treat the terrorism. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. But my point is, we can differentiate to two. The first one is how to address the political, economic, and social grievances. That's the general development policy, I think, right? So how to narrowing the gap between the rich and poor, Gini coefficient, blah blah blah, right? So to make a more economic equitability being realized. I also said even in front of my senior Indonesians from any political camps, political disagreement is common anywhere, including in democracy. But we have to be aware. There are 5 levels of gradations, 5 levels of managing political disagreement. The first one is a totally peace, which is in the heaven, not now. Okay, at least the second line. The second line is we have a disagreement, but we got to manage it in a peaceful way, right? In democratic way. The political oppositions, they can engage by having oppositions from engage from the newspaper or criticize the government, blah blah blah, and then the government can engage back by give their argument, support by think tanks, the healthy life of a democratic life. But the third layer is the political pressure. Is when the government start suppress their political oppositions, their opposition parties, like criminalize whatever anyone that criticize toward the government. This is dangerous because why? Because it will invite the response by the non-state actors. They will respond. I'm going to talk a little bit about the case of Jakarta governor, Pak Ahok. Also, we know each other. My point, we have to be careful with that because government is in the central position to decide the future trajectory of Islamist movement in Indonesia. This is my thesis. It depends on the political leadership, right? If the government keep suppressing their political their opposition, it will degrade to political violence. The people will fight through a non-democratic way, outside the systems, engage in terrorism, and then government will do counter-terrorism. And then the non-state actor will engage in insurgency, and the government will engage back in counter-insurgency. And after that, the last stage, which is civil war. So everything back to the government is up to them. This is the challenge of democracy, that we have to be wise in that seeing this. So I get so many questions about what is my opinion about the event. I think most of you heard about Jakarta governor, the case of Jakarta governor, the Christians, Chinese ethnics, the first time. There were like a lot, many, like 10 million Indonesians who went to the streets doing demonstrations in November 2016, 2017, early 2017, demand President Jokowi for Ahok to be convicted for the blasphemy, for the blasphemy. And Ahok said, I'm treated unfairly. That's why I react that way. It's according to him. My argument is why you are treated unfairly. If Indonesia is not having Pancasila or unity in diversity or a pluralistic country, you're not going to become the governor in Jakarta. You can become governor in Jakarta because Indonesia is Pancasila nations. It's a pluralistic nations. We trust in the unity and diversity. But if you got the problem with the Muslim people, you have to do some self introspection. What's wrong with you? So Ahok, even though he's not angel, but he's not a Satan. I mean, he's just a human with his strength and weakness. So basically, he was emotionally triggered to respond to the fourth and the third line of the political Islam in Indonesia. They were he's very emotional, like Christian, Chinese, you cannot lead Indonesia, you cannot lead Jakarta, you know. And then he's emotional. And senior people already reminding him, be careful, you are being dragged to their battlefield. Why you have to respond to them? You are supported by the first line of political Islam. Second line, and then he's emotional, and he slip off the tongue. He said something can be exploited by his political opposition. So that's the case. And then for the blasphemy law, there have been so many victims of it, and most of them are Muslim in Indonesia. I mean, saying something wrong about other religions, and then they're convicted with the blasphemy law. So my point is, and then they're put in the jail like more than 2 years, 3, 4, 5 years. Ahok was there in only 2 years. Ahok only 2 years. So it's fine with him. It's fair. So in the mind of Islamist movement by the time is the government was trying to protect him. That's the issue. That's why the political pressure happened when the government tried to manipulate the law and political means in order to preserve their political goals. Basically, that's the definitions. And then the non-state actors react by, okay, we go to the street, we boycott, we do demonstrations until stalemate, the state of stalemate. That's why both sides have to be self-introspective. And we got to be careful with that. And then for the second part of the policy focus is we have to be specific in dealing with the social network. They are engaged in cyber and also in the physical realm. So we have to infiltrate the networks and to do the counter operations. Right. And then the social network is not only in a domestic case, it's globally connected. It's globally connected. And the second one is the ideology. Ideology of jihadism, Salafism, Takfirism. Okay, let's say there's some country like giving funding to Indonesia to establish the schools, Salafist schools. Maybe the school is non-violent, Dr. Blau, like you said, non-violent, but this is just one click away from becoming violent. Right? I think Indonesian government must be there enough. And then whoever want to lead Indonesia, trust me, they have to know how to deal with Islam. Indonesia is the country, the nations with the very deep social cleavages, right? I can see from the three angles based on ideology. There are a group of people want to keep Pancasila as the state ideology, and then they are in other side of the populations want to have Islamic law as the national ideology. Islam as national ideology. The second one is based on economy. There are certain people want to use the socialist-based economy to build the nations, and the other is the capitalism elitism space. And the third one is based on the system of government, federalism or unitary states. Based on the research from the Hebrew University, they're based on the 62 countries, democracy collapse or not collapse. 32 countries with the surviving democracy and 30 countries with the collapsing democracy. The finding saying that the country, the nation, and the state with the deep social cleavages are very sensitive for their democracy to collapse if they have the unitary state system and presidential system. This is what Indonesia is having. I'm not saying that we have to switch to become a federal system. No, I'm defending the unitary state of Indonesia. But my point is we have to be careful. We have to know how to lead. That's why I said to my advice to Pak Ahok is you are not political leader. You have to be careful with your mouth. You have to be careful with your behavior. You are not just a consultant or doer like a field manager. No, you are a political leader. It's different. The way you lead the nation, you have to lead the society is different. You cannot do. I mean, like you have to be sensitive. You have to be sensitive. And economic, inequality, blah blah blah. So this is the challenge. But we can do that. We can do that. So, and then the last one is we have to be there. I think with any countries that sponsoring the ideology of Islam that is against Indonesian values. If I'm in the position in the very strategic position in Indonesia, I will stop from the original source. I will deal with them directly. Stop. Right. So, but if funding coming and then they establish school systems, see? Just waiting for the time, just waiting in 1 to 2 years, 3 years, and then we've been going through certain levels of certain states of a policy. In 2002, we denied that we have a terrorism. We had a terrorist. In 2006, we began to acknowledge that okay, we have some radicals, and after that, since 2010, 2017, Indonesian government start to becoming more suppressive and preventive. This is the good things. Government has to change, and then my point is, and then the whole of government approach has been implemented since 2010 until 2017. 2010 was Indonesian government established National Counterterrorism Agency like a NCTC. NCTC has been here for the last 10 years, right? So Indonesian NCTC has 10 years, but Indonesian NCTC has the operational arm. Basically, they are engaged in detection, prevention, direct action, and international engagement. We keep working on it, and then this is a really multi-lines of efforts. And then for the one test case is democracy. This is the last part of my presentations. The basic argument of the Islamist, Salafist Islamists, especially violent Salafist Islamists, is democracy is too good, man-made, not from Allah, must be replaced. Right. So the responsibility of the government is to make sure that Indonesian democracy is in the good. I mean, the Indonesian democracy index, at least in the good shape. There are 4 indicators. The first one is free and fair elections. The second one is the security of the voters. The third one is the absence of foreign intervention. The fourth one is either the elected public officials can deliver their promise or not. So in 2014, there was elections. 51, 49%. President Jokowi won the elections, right? And the result was contested in the constitutional court. And then the court said President Jokowi still won the election. And then Pak Prabowo accept the result. Okay, that's fine. Okay. But my point is, in 2014, 2016, the 2 years was used by President Jokowi to consolidate his power. Because by the time President Jokowi, Governor Jokowi as a governor of Jakarta decided to run for the presidency of Indonesia, he always said in the public, even 5 days before he decided to run, I'm not ready. I'm not ready. I'm not ready. I'm not thinking about that. I'm not ready. See, like a mayor of Washington, said, I'm not ready. So my point is, that's fine. He decided to run and he won. That's fine. But the consequences is he's not ready by the time. So he needs the first 2 years to consolidate his power. And then in 2016, Pak Ahok, the governor of Jakarta, made a slip of the tongue. And then the people, the majority of Muslim people go to the street and then do demonstrations, right? And the government was distracted again. And then now this is already 2017. 2018, the presidential candidate have to register already to the elections committee who want to run for the presidency. So 2019 is the election. So you can imagine, for next 2 years, everybody now is getting busy again with politics. In Indonesia, who will becoming president in Indonesia in 2019? So and then my concern is, I get a question this morning when I made a presentation at National Defense University. So what is the chance of counter-radicalization in Indonesia? I think in one side it's good. I mean, we have to be firm with the violent or non-violent ideology, Islamist ideology that's against the Indonesians' values and rule of law. But at the same time, government must be sensitive because they think that sometimes, according to my research here, governments tend to criminalize anyone that is critical toward them. So this is the counterproductive to what they're doing. Because what is important is to make sure that rule of law is they carry rule of law. They're consistent with implementing rule of law. But on the other side of the story is, some people said, the government started criminalizing their political oppositions. After their political oppositions get some backdoor dealing, ready to support for 2019, they're no longer being criminalized. It's what they're thinking. I'm in the scholar position. I have to be neutral. I don't want to be involved in the fighting between the 2 camps or 3 camps. I want to be light of the world, so to tell the truth, right? So this is what happened. It's a counterproductive. So this is a challenge of the nation. But we have to make sure that my message is in 2019. I kindly back international world to make sure that Indonesia's election in 2019 is free and neutral. There is no foreign hands being involved in supporting any candidates, because otherwise, trust me, it will implode. The grievances in the Islamic heart, Islamists, not only third, maybe in the second line. Already is very heating up now. So we have to be careful. In 2019 is very critical. We need the American support and also global audience support to make sure that the elections will be carried on in fair and free. And then, so for the counterterrorism policy, we look forward. We try to be more creative, and like what Dr. Bloch has asked me, and also the question that was asked to me this morning at NDU. What is the most important factors in the effective counterterrorism policy in Indonesia in the near future? This is my argument. Based on the national constitution in 1945, the main national security actors is national military and national police. We don't have a state police, we have a national police. It's like FBI, national police, doing everything. National police, we don't have state police. And national military, we don't have a national guard. We have a national military, right? So these two, and then they used to be in the same organization, one umbrella, Indonesia Armed Forces. When President Suharto was stepping down in 1998, they were separated. Since their separations, the competition is still going on until today, especially in dealing with the domestic security. This is terrorism, is one of the examples. And that's why my thesis, Dr. Blau, if Indonesian national military and Indonesian national police they're getting along in this particular case, it will be good, it will be fine. And political leadership must be not being egoistic. They have to be, they think long term for dealing with Islamist radicalism. They have to stop lying if they're lying, because they have to give the example to their citizens, because the center of the government is the good life of citizens, right? So, and then that's why the current national security bill is focusing on how national police can have more better and solid in synergy with the Indonesian national military. Hopefully the bill will be passed sometimes this year or next year maybe, and I hope my thesis, 80,000 words of thesis, can inform the Indonesian policymakers and the new counterterrorism bill that will be passed hopefully next year before the election 2019. Thank you so much. If we have any questions and answer, I will be happy to discuss with. Thank you.